Yeah, I suppose.
Okay, so
Another thing to decide, which is
window
convention.
capture.
Yeah.
Okay, we're on. What's happening with your Christmas background?
Rather like it. Makes me look like I don't know, one of these weird chocolate cakes with the big silver thing on top. The Christmas beer's coming on quite nicely, I think. What I'm trying to do, I'm trying to get into a point. I don't know why. I just decided, and then I would get rid of it in January. It just that's what 2 years of lockdown does.
Scotland. Okay, so the deck that Troy presented is titled Dreamcatcher Funding. So, just to recap, our concerns with the funding model have always been that for some reason it feels like the Dreamcatcher is in opposition to corporate structures, and
That's
that
the. Well, yeah, we've not really tested it, but yeah. Okay, I'm in Dreamcatcher Funding. See. Oh yes, I know this. Yeah.
and it also seems that from our previous experience at companies that remain unnamed, building the Dreamcatcher immediately triggers greed of shareholders and governance mechanisms and employees,
Right.
and
Which,
even our own, if I'm being honest.
well, yes, because as soon as you start talking in that area, I mean, this is exactly what ambient attribution is meant to defeat, right? And it's ironic that trying to get funding using the traditional way for something that breaks the traditional funding grids. The first thing
It's
you
a
do is because
paradox.
a slice of the pie. It's like, fuck you. We want a slice of the pie, and the pie's not even been fucking baked yet.
Yeah, it's
It's
the
like,
paradox
uh,
of Dreamcatcher funding. Okay, but then, I think it was a few weeks ago. I started talking to you about, well, look, remember, because I started this, kicked off this discussion about traces, right? And I was like, that's a thing, we've missed it completely. If we can make our funding model be entirely about that, um, and
yeah.
it sort of, traces caused a bit of a kerfuffle. Troy made this deck that was a general deck. We called it
Mm,
a non-fungible asset. Sounds good to me.
mm,
Um,
mm.
but anyway, we can have our big sort of word showdown later. It's just that uh, making a private company that had basically you put your money in, you get one share for $1, and then the
Mm.
mandate of that company is to go out and acquire these traces or NFAs. I'll just call them traces because you and I have been talking about traces, and we know
Oh,
what
yeah,
we mean.
yeah.
Um, but we need to reconcile that word so that the whole lot of us are saying the same word.
Yeah.
Um, so this company goes out and it's mandated to do whatever it can to get the most value for its shareholders by causing traces to exist and buying traces of other people. We
Yeah.
would give that company some kind of guarantees from ourselves because we'd be like, well, you'll have right of first refusal. We'll limit the projects that this company's designed to be for. It's not for everything that we ever think of. It's for just critical to
Right.
function.
Usual. So that's in the context where there's just us operating on the Dreamcatcher, is it?
Right of first refusal means that if we identify a trace that needs to be made,
Mhm.
that company would have the right to be the first one to fund it.
Right. Okay. All right. I understand. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And
And that
if
includes traces that generate the code for the Dreamcatcher itself, for the DCM, as well as apps.
well, that's how
Yeah.
we want to get paid as well. So we can't. be, we can't set it up so that we can defraud the company, so that, like, the traces need to be earnest. Like, we can agree some sort of fixed rate or something with the company, so that we're not just milking it for expensive traces that aren't really worth what the
Right.
company pays, that sort of thing. We
Yeah.
can't really take salaries. We can only take trace payments.
Yeah.
In effect, we can agree to work for some sort of a fixed attribution model. I'm not sure, something to
Yeah.
make that company a bit special. But what Troy was pushing at here, and I think I only just understood what he meant, was that we can make a DAO that represents the shareholders of that limited liability company,
Mm-hmm.
and then the voting and all that can be done on that system. So basically, what he's saying is that we can, first of all, we can use paper versions of the DPL to do the agreements with the main, the company formation, so that we don't need the Dreamcatcher to get going, but we know that it's future compatible as soon as the Dreamcatcher comes online.
Mm-hmm.
And then we set about building that software using these traces, tracking it all manually, and then get to the point where we can construct this DAO where there can be a bit more, some voting, some more participation from the shareholders.
Mm-hmm.
And then that DAO owns traces, and secondary funding rounds can be done insofar as, once you decide you're going to do a new round, you make a new class of share, and then you distribute all of the traces to the shareholders proportionately from that first round. Any cash left over just goes into buying the second class of shares at the same rate as everyone else. So it doesn't really...
Yeah. So the first question is, just so I'm clear, when we're talking about ownership, does the DAO take on the governance of the traces, or is it an entry in the attribution where the attribution algo is agreed in the paper contracts, the terms of
What does
the company's
it mean
formation?
to own the governance of a trace?
Is a huge difference. If you own the governance of a trace, then outside of whatever stipulation is locked inside of the contract, you can PR against that trace. So, for example,
but you can only do that for a future trace. Something that's been made stays made.
No, not necessarily. I mean, maybe this is a trivial example, but there's probably more complex examples, because it's an important point. You could PR against a change of the description of the trace, for example, but anyone on the attribution doesn't have necessarily control through the governance. So ownership is through governance, and the royalties, the beneficial ownership, I guess is the official way to say it, is through the attribution.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, the governance, we want those. I guess now that you raise the question, we want those traces to be immutable. There's nothing stopping us from making a trace that says it's done and it stays done. Yes, you could make a trace that's malleable.
Yeah, you could write a governance algo saying, we'll say no to every PR.
Yeah.
And there you go.
Easy. Done. And so, because what we can't have is, we can't have that limited liability company starting to exert control over the network in any way. So,
right.
the traces that it makes, they are inert. They are a royalty stream for the code created that only ever gets paid if ambient attribution ever becomes a thing.
Yeah. Right. So I'm just taking note of that one because that's an important one. Okay. Yeah, I agree. So if we this algo that we just created, the just say no algo, would lock that as a thing forevermore. You couldn't even destroy it
Yeah,
because any PR to destroy it
yeah.
would just say yes.
You could wrap it in another trace.
Okay.
You could assign it,
You should be able to. You should be able to.
yeah,
But that's more than say no.
and you can assign it, but you can't modify its contents once like these kinds of traces need to have some sort of a classification that names them as something that's like
Yeah.
immutable.
I think this is. It doesn't seem that hard actually, because in any document that creates a company, of course, there are the rules around the governance of that company about even down to annual general meetings and voting rights and so on. All we need to do is to write out longhand for this first time, longhand and paper inside of the creation documents for the company exactly what the algo says. We could even actually express it in code.
I mean, just plain English would be same. I think it would be very simple, and it would
Yeah.
also have a bit of open endedness to it because that's part of the spec of the system we're building. You know, if you believe in us, the people that are going to build it, and you believe that we're trying to build something that's, right,
Mhm.
then do you need those details? Well, you're welcome to see the code and all that, but it's like,
So
yeah,
just a code is a very tight way of effectively writing a legal
we'll
contract. Code and
see. We'll see
what's it?
how much uptake we get from the investors for it. I think this
Mm.
is a great deal for investors. So,
Mm.
like they may not need a lot of that. I mean,
So
there's two investors I can think of that wouldn't actually ask for too much detail. They'd just be like, "Sounds good, let's do it." So,
yeah. So the next question is in terms of the traces that this company purchases, if it's inside DOS, where does the revenue stream come from? I mean, if they're a block producer, yeah, fine. If they're building apps, that's obvious.
where does the
Actual
revenue
DOS,
stream come from for the limited liability company?
if they were to say, "Okay, we're going to help you complete the DOS,"
It comes from the royalties that come from the ambient attribution system being used. So basically, they get a slice of every single payment ever.
right? So we also need to, in that contract, because they will ask, we'll need to define what that ambient attribution algo is.
Yeah, but look, like I say, only if they ask. Like we'll see how far we can get with explaining it at a high level. If we still get no takers, then we'll just have to add more details or something like that. But we know what we
Yeah.
can't compromise on. We can't turn this into an assertions based thing. We can't pick magic numbers like 10% slice. Like it doesn't work. So
Yeah.
we can give people as much as they need, but let's keep in mind that there's a wide pool of people out there, and we'll find the ones that get what we're trying to do. We're not trying to scam anyone or deceive anyone with what we're doing. It is a fuzzy thing to achieve because of its very nature. It's hard.
Yeah.
We just want to get it built, and
Yeah.
like we are not asking for shares in the company because we expect to get paid via this ambient attribution system. So
Right.
sort of
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
we don't get our upside unless it works. They don't get theirs unless it works. We're aligned.
Kind of the whole. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then so that kind of model, I mean, we'd sort of skirted around that notion and we knew it needed to hinge around traces. But what Troy's pointed out is that, first of all, making a DAO that is in charge of saying how the funds get allocated, that's actually useful. I was imagining it was just a traditional company with governance and it's just us. But as soon as the software is capable, us representing the shares of that company online and then allowing them to do things like vote is a powerful mechanism. Now, what he also pointed out was, because I was like, well, one of these liquidity vaults you're talking about. He explained that there was a way in which we could allow people with a credit card to turn up and put money in, and it's not a security because they're providing a loan, and the loan comes back to them as the royalties come in. Additionally, he pointed me to a site that allows you to buy NFTs of artwork using a credit card. And, you're saying that, Visa haven't revoked their payment processing license, so it's kind of okay. And then, when we were talking about it, it's like, well, a trace is something that's done. And Troy was like, well, you can buy and sell song royalties, song rights. Those aren't securities. They may or may not earn a royalty. They're a finished thing. They're work done. They have some value. Like the code that these traces represent fulfills those requirements.
That's true only if the thing did actually exist at the point where you're selling the royalties to it. So that would assume that we, for example, like keep working on
traces. So Ford traces, you couldn't ask people to buy a Ford trace using a credit card.
Right, because his work is uncertain. It may fail.
But then again, it could be that you could construe that it's like paying for Kickstarter products before they're built. You could argue it was like paying for work from a contractor before the work was done. Those are all legitimate ways to use your credit card. They get more and more fuzzy as you sort of extend out the capabilities. But the bottom line is, what Troy's pointed out is that there's a secondary means of fundraising that we can do that is like retail based because of the fact that we're only dealing in traces. We only deal in finished things. You can buy those things.
This company sets up a website, has its shareholders, but you can go in there as a retail customer, put some money in, and get some money back.
You can either put it in a pool as a loan, or you can specifically purchase some NFTs that exist already, or some traces that exist already. Or you might, if the bills check out, be able to purchase one that doesn't exist yet.
Did Troy say anything about the loan being really quite similar to a bond?
He used that exact word.
Right. Okay.
He said it was like a I forget what he said, but it was the thing out of The Big Short. Anyway, it's on the recording. We streamed it. So there's like, and so like setting up a limited liability company would be good because we could get like a few big chunks from the investors who have sort of seen the story unfold. They know how the game goes. They know us. That's great. And then we can get these retail-based sort of add-ons that can sort of act to accentuate. They can improve participation, which is essential to the. It's basically the critical to function thing that you can't build. It's the people coming to it that we just can't, uh, you know, can't alter, right? And so
That
letting
makes sense.
people buy in with small amounts continually is good for participation.
And presumably that company, by allowing retail investors to come in, will take some kind of chunk of that, because otherwise, why would they? Why would the shareholders allow that to happen?
Well, the tools that get used to do the retail investing had to have been built by someone to whom attribution is owed.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that.
Oh, yeah, okay, all right,
Plus, you know, like the initial shareholders, you kind of want them to. They want the system to have extra money coming in because it increases the chance that the system as a whole will work properly, and they for sure have their investment in on the ground floor.
Yeah, that's a fair point. That's a fair point. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so
Because
that's
nobody else turns up. Yeah.
And then what we'd have is other projects. So, like, we've got a number of companies circling around us that want apps of various kinds. Those should be done through the Dreamcatcher directly. Like, I don't know if we want to set up something like you can get like a segregated portfolio company, which allows you to act like you're lots of different companies all in one. So you could do like one share class per company, and it is isolated from the other one, so that the liability doesn't jump between boundaries. It's like a virtual machine, basically.
Yeah.
So we could do that and run those projects that way. If the projects needed to follow the same model where they buy in and get the traces made, or we could just I don't know if we'd be allowed to let people purchase future traces ahead of time. Maybe we could. But either way, they need to be native Dreamcatcher projects.
I agree with that. But if a company comes in with a known demand and are willing to pay a certain amount for it, that's effectively a future trace, but that's not an investment. It would be the same thing as paying a painter to paint a picture and then agreeing that there's going to be a 50% royalty stream or a song.
Yeah,
50% royalty.
right. And the thing that gets you around that makes it not a security is if it's sort of like it's going out to the open market to fulfill. It's not controlled by us. Anyone can fulfill it.
Yeah.
So we got a bit of legal work to do to make sure that workflow stands up. But if it does, then these projects would be able to raise money from just people using their credit cards to buy pieces of work or to buy into these pools where the pools do something. That might be security, but either way, there's ways around it.
Yeah, or indeed, the ideal thing is what we've been talking about, which is company A has demand, puts a future purchase out for 50% of the royalties, say, and then company B has exactly the same demand, sees that without permission, just invests in the same thing, and either speeds it up or gets a royalty stream because someone has traded their own attribution for the trace.
Yeah.
I think that'd work quite nicely. In fact, yeah, it's like
anyway, like we don't need to have those fancy mechanisms now, but I believe this genuinely gives us a way to set up a limited liability company, sell a security to some big investors and know that the governance mechanism won't try to eat the dream catcher or fight with it.
Mm.
And it all hinges
Yeah.
around our explanation of traces.
Yes. Yeah. And that actually sounds not actually sounds pretty good investment proposition.
Yeah. So I'll talk to Troy more about what he means by the liquidity vaults. I think I got what he means, but there's some cases in my head that make that a security, because if it's a pool of money that gets managed by someone and you own a slice of that pool, then that's security-ish. But he was talking about the fact that a lot of it these days gets done with buying into governance. So you're buying into the pool for the purpose of participating, as opposed to buying into it and entrusting someone to do the work or manage the money. So if you're really buying a governance token and that requires you to participate in the actual work, then that can be made open to anybody anywhere to start to play with. So that gets really fun really quick, because that's access to the retail market with not a lot of hurdles. Because we are in fact selling something that's like it's a piece of work.
Yes. Yeah. Is I like the song analogy.
Yeah. And we're not asking for salaries. We're just saying, like, here's the work. The work goes out into an open market. It's not controlled by us.
Yeah. Yeah. The record company is the limited liability company, and we're the recording artists, effectively, or anyone can be recording artists.
Yeah. So anyway, like, after Troy explained that to me, I'm like, well, that
seems to work.
That ticks all our boxes. Yeah. So I mean, the only real differences to what he put forward is that we wouldn't use this this SAFT, the sale against future tokens thing. We just simply.
Yes, I see it. Yeah.
We'd sort of simplify it down to, like, you have securities, and the governance token is a great idea that he put forward. So we'd probably tie the shares of the company to governance tokens, and it would also, at a later date, allow some kind of retail governance token to be purchased. There was another mechanism he was talking about of, like, collateralizing the traces. I didn't understand that, so I probably need to learn more about what he means. But loosely speaking, this looks like the way to go to me.
It seems, number one, it doesn't break the Dreamcatcher on day one, which is always our concern.
Yeah, right. We make our arch enemy on day one.
Yeah, and somehow we've got to suck at the teat of Mammon in order to get this Mammon killer thing.
Yeah.
Which always
if that was ever going to
work. And also I like the idea of the governance token in terms of pointing out demand, because that's, again, wisdom of the masses.
Yeah.
So it's not just
we'd run it first. That's why it's a security as a limited liability company. But ideally, we're looking to transition to it being run by anyone. Well,
exactly the same way as any project.
This also meets our requirements that you could make a second structure that followed the exact same principles as this one did, and those two would not be enemies. They would cooperate with each other and amplify each other and make it more likely that the Dreamcatcher appears. Yeah, exactly.
It's the network effect, isn't it? It's like building your own network, someone else building a network, and you deciding to appear.
Yeah. Look, I'm going to have to go in 5 minutes' time. But the last topic we covered was if hypothetically there were some patents that covered the operation of some of the protocols of the Dreamcatcher.
Mm-hmm.
My question to Troy was, would they be useful in being put in this company? And
Mm-hmm.
he was pretty quick to say yes, and he explained that like what we could do is we could set up. Remember how we had the original idea back in April to use the patents to strengthen the ecosystem so that you could sort of pursue your rights? Yeah. So what we could do is say that when you sign a DPL, it also gains you access to these patents so that outside of the Dreamcatcher, your work is protected. Like if someone's in the Dreamcatcher, the code governs how they pay you and how it all works. But outside,
yeah, I mean, patents are useful, but I think only acceptable really when they back up a license which is permissive in the way that we set up Dreamcatcher. In the same way as
right. But I mean, like, we kind of want that model so that, like, people who own patents, we want them to put them into the Dreamcatcher or have an incentive to do so that they can get, like, predictable royalties, and so that when you sign a DPL, you should be getting access to all these intellectual properties because they're all put in there by people who have agreed to ambient attribution pricing. So you basically get access to a whole bunch of patents, and you're just going to pay a fair royalty on them. It's sort of this. I don't know. I reckon there's something there, but maybe that's for like a later.
I'm slightly queasy about that because patents can be abused in terms of ownership. Well, the whole point of it is ownership,
well, so
but
can
also
licenses, right? And so can company structures. Like the point is that there appears to be a model in here whereby you can take some patents of any kind, put them into the Dreamcatcher, and offer them at ambient attribution rates in a way, so that people they don't need to negotiate with you patent by patent. Purpose by purpose.
Right. Yeah. Right. So what we're talking about here is a DPL module that you accept. And why wouldn't you? But if you're the patent holder, you would probably want to opt in on that one and saying, okay, so I'm naming these patents while you're on the Dreamcatcher. If you use it, if you run the thing, I guess, inside the Dreamcatcher, then this is the license. And that is very close to attribution anyway. All we're doing there is earthing the contribution to something prior and in the real world in terms of a patent.
Yeah, pretty much, man.
So that sounds a lot.
Yeah. Sorry, I got to run. But I'm very excited by that, and I'm very excited by the call I had with Troy today. I think that's a good funding model. I talked to him about moving stuff to Git. He was mostly concerned about not moving it over because he thought that it might drive you mad because there'd be like changes in Google Docs and then changes in Git and all that. But that was
we shouldn't do. Yeah, no.
His only objection. So if you feel like carrying on like you were to move all the stuff over to Git,
that's fine. I'm actually itching to get everything across. Because
let's do it.
The real is when they're on both.
Yeah, and then he said that you guys did actually release a version of the DPL.
Yeah.
And he thought that should be the first thing that goes across to Git.
And you're quite right. It's like, other than the fact that we're both nodding and patting ourselves on the back on the recording, saying, hey, we've done it. There's no other...
Once we're in Git, we can actually tag releases and be like, this is version X, at this commit, and it also assures the attribution in an easy way to calculate too.
I was thinking, here's one question just before you go, whether these different types, so specifically, the core DPL is different from the docs for the Dreamcatcher, because the docs for the Dreamcatcher are about the Dreamcatcher. The core DPL is something that we as Dreamcatcher users are offering. I don't know whether that should be in the same repo or that should be a separate.
Repo, I don't like. It's all in the same repo until we figure out how to break it apart. Those distinctions make no difference to us just now because there's four of us. So
yeah. Fair enough. All right, well, I'll crack on that. I'll do the DPL today. Yeah.
Okay.
Nice.
Catch you later. Sorry to be a bit rushed.
I know. I'll try and wake up next time.
Okay. See ya.